Hey everyone, in this video, I want to show you how you can save Cortex logs to the Cortex database and package them up and send them to us for troubleshooting. One important note on this is that in order to be able to save Cortex logs to the database, Cortex needs to have write access to the database, or at least the part of the database where it saves these logs. If you're currently using a read-only SQL user with Cortex, check out the video in the description, linked in the description, where I show you how to configure Cortex to either use a separate schema in the same database that you can enable read-write access to, or use a completely separate database for the Cortex specific thing items, the Cortex specific tables. Those videos are linked in the description down below. Now, let's take a look at Cortex and this new feature in Cortex 1.7. So here we have Cortex. Uh, Again, a quick note, anything under this admin link is something that requires access to the the Cortex part of the database, either the Cortex schema in the same database that you're using for your Cherwell data or in a totally separate database. Same thing with the saved searches. If you're not seeing saved searches on your instance of Cortex, that just means that Cortex can't write to the database. It can't write to any part of the database, which means that we can't enable this feature on your system. So if you want to see that, again, links down in the description uh, to how to enable that. So under admin, we have this new view logs option. If you haven't enabled logging to the database, you see this yellow banner, different from the yellow banner at the bottom. But this yellow banner basically says you haven't turned on logging to the database. The way to do that is to go to Settings up at the top here and check this checkbox. Should we use the Cortex logs table to store logs? Pretty self-explanatory. If you check the checkbox, the answer is yes. And you can specify just how verbose the logs are. Uh, there isn't really a mapping between any particular concept and what the various levels here are. Error is typically only the worst case scenario issues. Critical is basically things couldn't continue. Um, which they may or may not actually land in the database. Warnings are situations where we could continue, but what we're showing on the screen may or may not be accurate. This is actually probably the most useful log level for you and for us as well. But in some cases, we need a little bit more information. So information gives us some, uh, additional information about what might lead to some of these warnings. Debug is really verbose and is really only useful for us as we're developing and as before features even get out to you all. Um, but in a pinch, we might need to turn on debug. So in general, I would recommend sticking with warning. That's a good happy medium. If we need more details, we'll go to a lower log level, a more verbose log level. If you only want to log the super critical items, then error or critical are what you want. I wouldn't necessarily recommend keeping this on all the time because again, it will grow the database, um, but that might be up to your preference. So I'm going to keep it at warning, and I'm going to leave that box checked. I just close that window, and now I see an empty grid here because so far I haven't had any errors. Now I could go around, I could browse various business objects, and I might get an error to generate or a warning, I guess, to generate. Uh, but let's pretend that I did something, I got a warning, and now I want to send it off to our support team for them to look into, figure out if there's a bug, if there's a misconfiguration somewhere, that sort of thing. I'll click this Export Logs button. And there is some information about exactly what we're exporting. Basically, it's an XML file that has all of that information that you see in this table behind this modal, and some information about your system. And when I say information about your system, specifically, we're talking like the version number that you're running, so that we can correlate the information in the log message to the actual version of code that you're running, so that we don't put ourselves in kind of a wild goose chase. We definitely don't want to get into a situation where we're trying to track down a bug that we've already fixed and it's only showing up because either we haven't released that version of code yet or you haven't upgraded to that version of code yet. So we want to be able to correlate what you're seeing with what's actually in the code. And then click proceed with download. And at that point, it downloads an XML file. The reason it's an XML file and not a zip, not a um, something that's encrypted or something like that, is specifically so that you can look at the file and you can look at its contents and see exactly what you're sending to us, exactly what we're going to see. Um, if there's any sensitive data in there, you have an opportunity to redact it. Depending on your log level, there shouldn't be any sensitive data in there. We try really hard not to log anything of a sensitive nature, but especially the debug level, sometimes we just need a little bit more detail when we're debugging on our local systems. So that can potentially have some sensitive data in it. So as long as you're logging at warning or above, warning, error, critical, you shouldn't have any sensitive information in your logs, but you still get the opportunity to look at it and see exactly what you're going to be sending to us. And then once you do that, you can delete all logs from the database. This prevents your database, that table from uh, getting out of control, getting too large. Um, and it also means that they're, not accessible to potentially anyone else who might log into the system. So my recommendation would be that you delete all logs after you've disabled logging. So I would click uncheck that button, close the modal, delete all logs. There's nothing to delete in this case, but it would delete all the logs, and then you're back to, a pristine table. If you run into another issue, you could turn on logs again, reproduce the issue, export logs, and then delete all logs again. And this way, you keep your database, that database table specific to the round of issues, the round of troubleshooting that we're doing right now, and you don't have just an extensive backlog of a month of Cortex logs that you're sending over to us. That's hard for us to sort through, and it doesn't really help you pinpoint the issue that you're running into either. So that's basically it. It's a pretty simple feature, but pretty powerful. This means you don't have to go looking to the Windows Event Viewer or the console. If you're running a Cortex as a container, you don't have to go looking at your container runtimes console logs, wherever they might be. Um, Anyone who's an admin can see this page and see exactly what's going on. You don't have to go find someone who works with the infrastructure in order to get all that information. So if you have any questions on that, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Um, and if you have to send us a batch of logs, um, this is the way to do it. And then send it to support@synapsesoftware.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.